My dear friends, good day. Behind me is a beautiful door that was made in a light yellow limestone. We could very well be in Cardiff Castle in Wales, or not far from the Tower of London in England. And yet, we are in France, in Normandy, more precisely in Caen. In fact, this stone that is behind me is the famous Caen stone that was used by William the Conqueror to build his own castle, but also a whole bunch of buildings when he crossed the English Channel. What's interesting is that finally, by staying within Normandy, well, we can tell the story of all these kingdoms that were conquered by the Normans, whether it's in England and even up to Scotland or Ireland. So in this episode today, we're going to talk about all of that, but also the influences and the links that all of these peoples have had over time, and which, you will see, still exist today. So here we go, you won't be disappointed with the journey. Even if we like to call him the Conqueror, William's story does not begin with a castle, but with abbeys. He became Duke of Normandy in 1035, and in 1050 he married Matilda, the daughter of Count Baldwin V of Flanders. The Pope, to prevent their alliance, decides to condemn the marriage of William and Matilda. But all this little world ends up signing an agreement. The two spouses can live together if they promise to found religious establishments. In 1059, the Men's Abbey and the Ladies' Abbey were built, two monuments financed by William and Matilda, and where they are now buried. Where there was only an embryo of several villages, it is these constructions that made Caen a real city, much more than its castle. Along with Rouen, it is mainly from this city of Caen that William will administer his duchy and prepare his wars. And the most famous of all, and without doubt, the invasion of England in 1066. But for that, you have to leave Caen. Direction, Bayeux. I am at the William the Conqueror Center, and what you see next to me is the Bayeux Tapestry. We are really just a drive from Caen, not far from the sea. But be careful, it's not from here that William the Conqueror's expedition leaves, and that the tapestry shows us very well. With the help of his wife Matilda of Flanders, the Duke organized a gigantic fleet that left from Saint-Valery-sur-Somme and landed at Pevensey. October 14th, 1066, he goes to Hastings to confront the King of England Harold II, who has just been crowned. This one, already exhausted by the assaults of the Danes, resists almost all day. But according to the tapestry, Harold dies, his eye pierced by an arrow. The English are completely defeated, and on December 25th, 1066, William is crowned King of England. We have already made 3 videos on Nota Bene that talk about this subject: the landing, the Norman invasions of England, and the administration of this new kingdom. But Caen and the Bayeux Tapestry have much more to tell us about the same subject, about this shock, this meeting, and finally this cultural understanding that will result from all this. William is a great administrator who now has to manage estates on both sides of the sea. But despite his victory, he is still threatened on all sides by Welsh or Scottish rebels, or even by the French armies. He therefore needs many messengers and representatives who travel the country, and all of them, Normans, English, or Saxons, must swear an oath to him. And woe to the one who betrays him. Indeed, the Doomsday Book that he had written between 1085 and 1086 allowed him to redefine the whole administrative network of England. But, curiously, the northernmost domains of the kingdom are considered as worthless. This is because, faced with the rebellion of 1067, William did not hesitate to have them burned and ravaged from top to bottom. It's a programmed famine. Crops are burned, farmers are mutilated, agricultural equipment and livestock are looted or destroyed. This region of England will take more than a century to recover. But another way to dominate the country was to build. In Hastings, William had a moat and bailey castle built, an expeditious fortification, but one that will be very efficient, especially against peoples who do not know this technique yet. This type of fortification will become established throughout England, Wales, and Ireland. But beyond the efficiency, William also wants a symbolic construction that strikes the spirits: the stone fortress. And so we come back to the famous Caen stone, the Caen Castle, after all. It has brothers and cousins all over the United Kingdom today. And when you know, it sticks out like a sore thumb. In the heart of the current city of Caen is the famous Castle of Caen. Built from 1060, William will make it his capital, and its dungeons, now in ruins, will follow a very Norman model which will be exported across the English Channel. Jacqueline Lawrence, for example, has combined geology with historical sources to prove that in 1278, 75 boats made the trip from Caen to bring 89,200 blocks of stone from Caen to the Tower of London. Of course, we didn't wait until the 13th century for this. As early as 1066, William had a first fortress built, which was reinforced in 1078, and would continue to evolve until it became the perfect medieval dungeon. Really representative of this period, 27 meters high and 32 to 36 meters wide, it crushes the whole city with its shadow. A building that sends a very clear message. You don't have to look for the king. Since 1100, its dungeon has been used as a royal prison that has made the greatest of the kingdom tremble, and in which many British historical figures have spent time. Edward and Richard, the 12 and 9-year-old sons of Edward IV, Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's wife, and Thomas More, his best friend and advisor. And to control the Thames and the suburbs of London, a second castle is built, Windsor. It too will evolve enormously over time, but the Caen stone is still there, and its color and shape clearly remind us of its Normandy origin. And it's not just the military. Throughout the centuries, we also see civil and religious buildings, such as Norwich Castle and Cathedral, Oxford Castle, Canterbury Cathedral in the 11th century, Westminster Abbey in the 13th century, etc., etc. Again, during the 100 Years' War, the famous architect Henry Yeveley spent his life building and restoring the Tower of London, the Black Prince's Mansion, and the Palace of Westminster. The impact of Norman stone on the Anglo-Saxons and their descendants is so strong that even in the 19th century, they will use it for London Bridge, and even to build St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. So we're not going to list all the castles and all the churches because as levers of power, as you can imagine, the Normans didn't only invest in stone. Like in the two abbeys, the Men's Abbey and the Ladies' Abbey where I am now, it's not only the stone that counts, but also what you put inside. And the linguistic, cultural, religious influences of the Norman elites, they changed the identities everywhere they went, and they were not limited to England. A quick historical point. After William the Conqueror, who by the way is buried at the Men's Abbey in Caen, reigned his sons William the Red, then Henry I, and his granddaughter Matilda the Empress. She could very well pass the crown to her son, the young Henry II. But no, Étienne de Blois, another grandson of the Conqueror, takes the throne. For him, the interrupted male lineage is too blurred. In the name of the stability of the kingdom, he rejects the young Henry II. From 1138 to 1153, it is thus the Civil War, a period called anarchy, where each noble will take sides for Stephen or Henry according to his local interests. Because in the meantime, the Normans had time to spread all over the Channel. Through marriages and alliances, they brought some of their customs with them, but they also adapted to the local traditions. They became the Anglo-Normans of England, but also the Scoto-Normans in Scotland, the Cambro-Normans in Wales, and the Hiberno-Normans in Ireland. And yes, these are real identities. At the time, the historians Jourdan Fantôme or Giraud de Barry from Wales are experiencing a real identity disorder. For them, the pure Anglo-Saxons born on the island are quite despicable. But beware, the Normans who stayed on the continent are also a boastful, debauched, and badly advised people who pushed for a revolt against Henry II. In the 13th century, other authors squarely distinguished between the good gens naturales of the island and the bad gens étranges, the continentals responsible for all the evils of the 100 Years' War. Same thing on the Norman side, where they don't like the English very much. It is even said that they have a tail like beastmen. In short, you understood it quite early, in fact. Each one makes its power, its culture, its small business in its corner, while being wary of the neighbors and in particular of the king who reigns all there in London. So with anarchy, who's going to support which contender? I have two examples, in the Scoto-Normans and the Cambro-Normans. But since we are in the Ladies' Abbey, I feel like saying, ladies first. So we will start with Margaret and Matilda of Scotland, as well as Matilda the Empress. We have to go back to 1016, when Edmund Ironside is defeated by the Dane Knut the Great, and his sons Edmund and Edward are exiled to Hungary. It is there that his granddaughter Marguerite is born. As soon as she returns to England in 1057, bang! It's the Norman invasion of 1066, and Marguerite takes refuge in the north, in Scotland. This did not end too badly as she married the Scottish king Malcolm III. Thanks to her travels in Europe, she understands that Scottish Christianity must align itself with the continent and does everything to reform the religion. But above all, her children, Matilda and David, are very connected to the English court. Matilda of Scotland marries King Henry I of England and gives him a daughter, Matilda the Empress. As for David, he too lives most of his time between England and Normandy. All this little world undergoes such a cultural influence that they can no longer be considered 100% Scottish or Anglo-Saxon. These are the first Scoto-Norman princes. So of course, when anarchy breaks out in 1135, they stick together. David supports Matilda's side and seizes the cities of the north of England, and it is he who knights the future king, Henry II. Despite the setbacks, he never withdrew his oath of support. Finally, Matilda wins, and Henry II offers David a domain in Cotentin in Normandy. This King of Scotland, who continues to reorganize all the Christian dioceses, is so proud of what he owns on the English side that he calls himself Roi Alban et Saxon, King of Scotland and England. You can't get much more Scoto-Norman than that. In any case, David wasn't the nice puppy of the first Anglo-Norman king that came along. He also fought to defend his domains, of which he was very proud, and he had the chance to bet on the right horse, just like that. Anyway, we are now in front of the men's abbey to go to the side of England and Wales, and now we are going to meet a great lord who is on the other side, Richard de Clères. Here again we go back in time. In 1066, Richard de Bienfait is a pure Norman who owns lands in Calvados. He advises William the Conqueror on the invasion of England, and as a reward, he receives a huge estate in the east of England, in Suffolk, in Clare. His descendants will continue to colonize all they can. To begin with, his son Gilbert claims from Henry I the right to march against the Welsh of Ceredigion, that is, Cardigan. With the king's permission, he thus imposes himself in South Wales. Generations pass, and when anarchy breaks out, the Lord of Clare is Richard Fitzgilbert, nicknamed Strongbow, the Strongbow. Well established in Wales and Normandy, he became a Cambro-Norman, as much Welsh as Norman. At the time of the anarchy, he supported Stephen of Blois. So of course, when his rival Henry II becomes king, he is suspicious of Strongbow and maybe confiscates some lands from him. And that's a disaster, because Richard is already in debt. Fortunately, the kings of Ireland are at war with each other, and in 1166, the High King of the whole island, Rory Crachar, exiles the King of Leinster, Diarmait MacMurpha. Diarmait fled the island, but asked Henry II for help. He is ready to pay his mercenaries if necessary. Henry accepts, and Strongbow jumps at the chance. If he goes further west, he will have enough to pay his debts and make powerful friends like Diarmait. Maybe he will even be able to obtain new domains, far from King Henry. So he sets out on an adventure with other Cambro-Norman lords, Robert Fitzstephen, Maurice Fitzgerald, and Raymond Fitzwilliam. All of these now typically Welsh names simply come from the Norman language and mean son of Gerald, son of Stephen, etc., etc. The Cambro-Normans will have many other impacts on the Irish language, and both languages contain common slang words. The coat is called the coat in Normandy and cota in Ireland, and the same goes for the jug, which is called the broch on both sides of the sea. But as you can imagine, if this influence was possible, it's also because the Cambro-Normans didn't just go for a little walk in Ireland. They settled on the island hard and even became Hiberno-Normans. That is to say, half Irish and half Norman lords, who felt more and more distant from the English king. It all starts with Strongbow. He helps the King of Leinster, Diarmait, who has a daughter, Aoife, and a son, Donald. In 1170, Strongbow married Aoife, and when Diarmait died in 1171, he claimed the throne of Leinster. After several years of struggle, in 1171, Donald died and Strongbow became king of a good part of Ireland. Of course, all the Normans that followed did the same. After landing in Waterford, they take Dublin and march on all sides. King Henry II realizes that they will eventually become powerful enough to challenge his identity. So he recalls all those who left without his blessing. And finally, he lands in Waterford in 1171. Strongbow is far too smart to resist him. He hands over the cities, claims to be his vassal, and to hold Irish lands only with his agreement. Nevertheless, he will spend the rest of his life saying clearly what he is: the Vice-King of Ireland, nothing less. Over time, the Norman hold on the island will continue to gain ground, but some regions will always remain entirely Irish. They have the full support of Rome, which wants to keep control of Gaelic Christianity, a rather original church that has developed on the island. Once again, the Hiberno-Normans are exercising a mixture of asserting their culture and appropriating what has already been done there. If they won despite their overwhelming numerical inferiority, it is notably thanks to the Moat Bailey Castle, then unknown on the island. Once the country was subdued, they reorganized the fields and the land into hedges. This is the birth of the famous Norman bocage. Of course, bringing Norman stone from so far away is too expensive for entire buildings, but sometimes we find hotels made of Caen stone. The ruins of the Abbey of Mellifont, founded in 1142 by monks from Clairvaux, contains Norman stone. And using local stone, the Hiberno-Normans still continue to reproduce their architectural model. In Kilkenny in 1172, Strongbow had a fortified tower built. In the 13th century, his descendants would make a very famous castle that would remain the property of the Butler family until 1967. Again, a deeply Norman family, since Butler is the deformation of the French bouteiller. But you can see this influence everywhere in the country. In Bunratty Castle, Blarney Castle, Malahide Castle in Dublin, King John Castle in Limerick, or the Round Tower of Rock of Cashel. And it goes in both ways. From the 13th century, Norman students expatriated to Paris must choose a sign of recognition. They take up 2 of the 3 lions of the Plantagenets, which on this side of the channel we prefer to call leopards. And here again, in the ancestor of all castles, here in Caen. We have to say that with Normandy we come back again and again because with Ireland and England, it's a love story that lasts. After Oxford and Cambridge, it was in Caen that Henry VI decided to found the 3rd university of the kingdom in 1432. In 1944, when the city of Saint-Lô was razed under the bombs, it was the Irish Red Cross that came to install a hospital for the inhabitants. And with Brexit, Cherbourg's port traffic explodes. Maybe even the Normandy ports will become the new interface for Ireland, since England is out of the game. For us, it's quite nice to think that by staying on this side of the channel, we have access to a whole page of the history of England and Ireland, including all the places I didn't have time to talk about, like in Falaise, in Rouen, in Évreux, in Dieppe, in Alençon, Avranches, Lisieux. All these places also knew the Vikings, then the Norman dukes, the English kings, the 100 Years' War, the Second World War, of course, with again British paratroopers who fought there. So, there is plenty to do. Thank you to Normandie Attractivité for the organization of this report. Thank you for the very warm welcome from all those who welcomed us, whether in Bayeux or at the Castle of Caen. There you go. Don't hesitate to recommend to us the places you have already visited and that you liked in Normandy. Honestly, it's a great region, and we'll see you soon on Nota Bene for 2 new videos. See you later.